Good evening. This is the Tuesday, January 9, 2024 meeting of the Town of South Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. We should first do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So the first item on our agenda is public participation. Is there anyone with the public who would like to speak on any subject which is not on the agenda? Hearing and seeing none, we move on. We have the minutes for December 12, 2023, and a special meeting December 12, December 12, 2023, and the December 12, 2023 regular meeting. Do we have any discussion or changes that people have noticed in the minutes? I didn't find anything. I need a motion. Or I guess we're going to do it by consensus, right? That's
your choice.
Yeah, let's do it by consensus. Any problem? Okay. I would like to welcome two new members to our board. Despina Bugansky and Mike Willett, both serving as alternates. While you're here for the first time, I thought I'd go over just what the rules are for alternates. You may have figured it out already, but I'll do it anyway, and the public may be interested. Generally, alternates participate the same as regular members in all of our business, except for two things. One is when we vote. So if we vote to adjourn tonight, you won't be allowed to vote to adjourn. The second thing is, after we've had a public hearing, and we have a discussion, what's called deliberation, about how we're going to vote, unless you're seated as an alternate, you are not allowed to speak during that discussion. Otherwise, any item, like all the items on tonight's agenda, you'll be given the same opportunity to participate as every other commissioner. Even in a public hearing, during the hearing itself, you'll be invited to speak. Now, we do try to run an orderly meeting, so I will call on people when it's their turn to speak. And if you forget that, I might remind you gently. But typically, we do it two ways. One is we just go down the table either one direction or the other and ask everyone if they have a comment. And then at some point, it sort of becomes an open discussion. If you turn your light on, I should be able to see it. Have you figured out how to turn your light on? Why don't you practice that? Yeah, okay. The other thing about these microphones is they work really well if they're about 6 inches from your face. If you're way back, they may not work so well. So, we have new business tonight. The first one is application 23-49P, the Town of South Windsor, request for renewal of a 2-year temporary and conditional permit for a 500 square foot business office within the community building for the South Windsor Chamber of Commerce on property located at 1776 Ellington Road, RR zone. And I understand our Director of Planning, Michelle Leip, will speak on behalf of the town.
Yes, thank you. I'll be representing the town on this. So this is a request for the renewal of the 2-year temporary and conditional permit for the Chamber of Commerce nonprofit office use of 500 square feet within the town's community building. This is the second time they've been back for renewal with this commission. The chamber does utilize the office area. Their typical hours are 9 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. They do have 2 part-time employees and 1 intern who works approximately 12 hours a week. They use up about 3 parking spaces in the front. If you've ever gone by, you may see them parking out front. The applicant does hold committee meetings, on average 5 meetings per month. They typically consist of 4 to 8 attendees. When they do have any larger events, they do hold them off-site at other locations. There has been some signage that the town worked with them and installed over the years. We have not had any concerns expressed. I do go by that site quite frequently. Parking doesn't seem to be a problem. If you're not aware, the town does have an employee gym in that same building, so there is some shared parking use on that site, but it doesn't ever seem to have any conflicts. The wording of the temporary and conditional permit regulation is that temporary and conditional permits may be granted by the commission for a period not to exceed 2 years. Such approval may be given after a public hearing if, in the judgment of the commission, the public convenience and welfare will be substantially served and appropriate use of neighboring property will not be substantially or permanently injured, and traffic and other hazards will not result from such use. This type of application renewal can be done without a public hearing. Typically, we only would take it to public hearing if there were any concerns and we thought we needed some additional public input. If this application is approved, there are no requested modifications. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll now go to commissioners. Does you have any comment? Commissioner Bernstein?
No comments or questions.
Commissioner Cavanaro?
No comments at this time.
No comments.
Commissioner,
No comments.
okay.
No comments.
No comments.
No comment.
No comments.
No comments.
So that's at this point, I have no comments either. A motion would be in order. And just so you know, on the back of the piece of paper that Michelle has given us, she has usually a draft of a motion. You can make changes when you make the motion. Since none of the alternates are seated, it would have to come from one of the members. Mr. Pasiconis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move approval of the Chamber of Commerce Office Application 22-04P with the following conditions. Condition 1, the temporary and conditional permit will expire on January 25th, 2026. And the second condition, all freestanding signs and/or building signs require the issuance of a sign permit before they are erected.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Commissioner Vittori seconded that. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. The second item on our new business is application 23-50P, Pete's RV T&C, request for renewal of a 2-year temporary conditional permit for storage of up to 50 campers on property located at 317 Chapel Road, I-291 Corridor Development Zone. And do we have someone here? Yes.
Everybody, Ryan Ayub with Pete's RV Center. I think this has been at that location about 6 years now. It's just a extended storage lot for overflow units, extra service units, waiting for parts, things like that. It's not a customer show lot or anything like that, just a extended
You
storage
can move a little
facility.
closer to the mic or
Sorry.
raise it up a little. Yeah. Thank you.
So that facility is, it's not a customer show facility or anything like that. We just use it to store some extra overflow sales and service units. So just looking to renew it, no changes over at that location.
Okay. Does that end your presentation?
I think that's it for me.
Okay. So we'll ask commissioners to comment. Commissioner Bukonski? Oh, all right.
Do you want my report? Thank you. So this is a request for renewal of a 2-year temporary conditional permit for the storage of campers, approximately 50 of them on property located at 317 Chapel Road in our I-291 corridor development zone. This was originally approved by the Commission July 9th in 2020. Sales and storage of recreational vehicles are allowed in the general commercial zone when associated with a business. That is where, general commercial is where the Pete's RV facility is down the street from here. There are no provisions for temporary storage in the I-291 corridor development zone, thus the reason for the temporary and conditional permit. The storage on the site is located to the rear and in the existing parking area. Just for the commission's benefit, historically, this area was cleared for temporary storage of wood back in about 2004. And at that time, there was a series of pine trees planted along the front there. They're pretty well established and do accomplish a pretty good screening job even today. The wording temporary conditional permit states that temporary conditional permits may be granted by the commission for a period not to exceed 2 years. Such approval may be given after public hearing if, in the judgment of the commission, the public convenience and welfare will be substantially served and the appropriate use of neighboring property will not be substantially or permanently injured, and traffic and other hazards will not result from such use. Again, this is a renewal that we can do without a public hearing. There have been no concerns expressed to our office for the few years that they've had that. If the application is approved, there are no planning modifications requested. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll ask for comments from commissioners. Commissioner Boganski?
No comment.
No mic down there, huh? Okay. Commissioner Willett?
No questions, no comments.
Okay. Commissioner LeBlanc?
I have nothing, thank you.
Commissioner Pasiconis?
I have nothing.
No comments.
No comments.
No comment.
No comment.
Nothing here.
I have no other comments either. So a motion would be in order.
Move to approve application 23-50, Pete's RV TNC, for storage of recreation vehicles at 317 Chapel Road, max 50 campers. The condition 1 is the temporary and conditioner permit will expire on January 25th, 2026, and will have to be renewed at the time if the use is to continue.
Waiting for a second.
Second?
Thank you. Okay, any discussion here? Other than that? Okay, in which case we'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're ready to move on to item 3 under new business, a preliminary discussion with John Swaggerty, Washington Prime Group regarding development proposal for 22 Wheeler Road, which is 50 acres behind the plaza at Buckland Hills, design commercial zone, and there's an attached request.
Sorry?
It's a little tricky because it does go on 2 different screens.
So it might be helpful if each of you signed in who are going to speak.
Okay.
And then if you give me the sign-in sheet, that would.
It might be better looking down here and seeing if you can call it up.
Okay.
You don't need that one on.
It's right here.
So is it a PowerPoint?
Yeah, it's a PDF. Sean, do you have
So you're only going to have one speaker?
Somewhere under your network here. No, is it not picking up this? I can't see it right. Okay. Is it right here?
You could go up to, oops. There we go.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
So what happens is you have to pull it over now because it's a double screen.
So I pull to which one?
Either one. I think if you grab it up here, not where it says create, it's just
Yeah.
the top of the window.
Oh, I see.
There. It's just like when you're at an office, you have a double screen, except one of them.
Except if I can't see it, so now I gotta.
Thank you.
Trying to zoom in.
Yeah, I want to zoom and get rid of all this out here. Stuff. There, great.
Okay, so would you each, as you speak, introduce yourself? And then you can go ahead with your presentation. Oh, let me just make one more remark. This is a discussion, so it's not a public hearing, and we won't be voting on anything. You will get impression from the members of the commission how we react to your proposal. I think none of us have actually seen the whole thing, so this will be new to us, but we will go around after you've made your presentation, and we may have questions as a result of that. But like I said, this is not a decision, it's not a public hearing, so the rules for public hearing don't apply here. And go ahead.
Okay. My name is John Swaggerty. I'm with Washington Prime Group. You see the WPG on the screen. We are the owners of the plaza at Buckland Hills, which is the shopping center, the large shopping center with the Trader Joe's and the other stores that's actually in the town of Manchester. Behind that property, we also own a parcel of land that's 57 acres and falls within the town of South Windsor. WPG, I want to call us, even though a lot of people know us as Washington Prime, we have owned that parcel for a number of years, 15 or so years now that they've owned that parcel. And especially in the last 5 or more years, the company has gone through some corporate restructuring that has sort of prevented our ability to focus on the property. But that corporate restructuring is over, and now we're turning to some places like this, actually in shopping centers, multiple across the country. And I'm here to talk about this one, because the truth is that it's a great property. It's a great piece of land. We love that shopping center, but we also really like South Windsor. We like this metro. We really like the proximity to the Evergreen Walk, just to the north of us. And we think that the property can be something really special. The presentation, of course, will bring you through some of our just very initial ideas about what the property could be. But we think that it could be something that, you know, the whole community can be proud of in the same way that we believe people are about Evergreen Walk, that it can offer the trails, connections, natural preserves, open space, and sort of public amenities that we see here, connecting to Evergreen Walk and sort of complementing that, bringing some residential units to the area that are needed. And that's something that we know there have been some concerns by the commission about residential units, but we have tailored a program here that we think will minimize those impacts and those concerns. And that's what we're gonna sort of walk through with you tonight in a, hopefully a brief manner, in a brief overview manner. But I just wanted to say, you know, thank you in advance and to introduce myself and to tell you that we're excited about the property. We're excited about working with you. And we look forward to a honest and transparent dialogue with you about the property. We're more than willing to have that dialogue with you. We understand you'll be willing to have that dialogue with us, and we look forward to it. With me here tonight, I have a couple of professionals that will do most of the speaking. Don Poland here, who some of you I believe know, is a planner with Goldman & York. Behind me here is Ashan Suking, who is from Langen. He has done a lot of the landscaping and landscape design component. And then Robin Pearson, our attorney, is here as well, although she will be taking notes. And with that said, I'm going to hand the microphone to Don Poland.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Commission. For the record, my name is Donald Poland. I'm with the firm of Goldman York Property Advisors. We are based at 111 Founders Plaza, East Hartford, Connecticut. I've been before you guys a number of times in the past, and I'm pleased to be back here again tonight. I share John's excitement for this site and location, and ultimately we're going to talk I'm going to provide an introduction on kind of the general land use context and relationship of this site to its surroundings. And then our landscape architect will discuss site-specific design options. And then I will wrap up with municipal fiscal impacts and school-aged children. So this image here is showing the site. You can see it located there in the center, identified as site. The shadings on here, the red is commercial development. The brightest yellow is the single-family development. And then the similar shading of what I would call an off yellow, but I'm awful with colors, to the site is the multifamily development. And then you see some industrial to the south. I think the key aspects of this site is, from a land use perspective and from a potential perspective, is one, it's tucked in behind the Buckland, the plaza at Buckland Hills in Manchester. It doesn't have that access or visibility that sites along Pleasant Valley, that other sites along Pleasant Valley would. Number two is it's to the west, it is surrounded by, to the west and a bit to the north, it is surrounded ultimately by existing multifamily. You have Westgate condos, you have the Cinnamon Spring condos, Burr Meadow condos, and adjacent right across the street is the Pheasant Hill condos, and then there's kind of a planned unit development of multifamily condos on that cul-de-sac just to the north of Wheeler Road. The other important aspect here is ultimately its relationship to Evergreen Walk. At the end of Smith Street, there's already a kind of informal trail connection from the cul-de-sac into the Evergreen Plaza. You'll see there highlighted, actually if I can use my cursor, it's not showing up the best, but you can see the pedestrian walkways that exist within Evergreen and extending right down near the end of the cul-de-sac on Smith Street. And then you also see existing trail network here. And this is essentially a half-mile radius around the site, and which is equivalent to a 10-minute walking distance. And to provide some context, ultimately, the 10-minute walking distance ends at the Whole Foods site to the northern end of the Evergreen Walk development. The point of this is really, this is a land use map, and it's to show that multifamily residential development would be or could be compatible with the development and surroundings. On one side, it is commercial development. On the other side, in the portion of the north side or to the west, it is multifamily development. And the site is really only adjacent to a small amount of single-family development that is actually on Smith Street. This, once again, shows the site without the land use and the better imagery related to, better imagery from the satellite imagery here. And once again, I just want to highlight that, you know, those proximity connections. There is a frontage piece from this parcel out onto Smith, and that's in a short distance to the end of the cul-de-sac where connections could ultimately be made into the Evergreen site. Having been involved in some of the recent multifamily at Evergreen, I just also want to make the note of, I think this commission's heard many times, and you'll hear from me further tonight, there's an important relationship between
Hey, we are having trouble hearing you. If you make sure the mic is in front of your face there, thank you.
Sorry, my apologies. Usually I'm well heard. There is I think you guys have heard a number of times, and I think you guys have recognized the symbiotic relationship between retail and residential. And that is, in order for Evergreen to prosper, there is a need for housing density around it, for that disposable income to be accessible to it. So we think the connections here to Evergreen are extremely important. With that said, I want to turn it over to our landscape architect to discuss specifics about the design options for this site, and I'll return in a few minutes. Thank you.
All right.
Good evening, Sean Suking, landscape architect with Langen. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. As you can see here in the first layout plan, it's something that's very simple to kind of give us the context of what we could do architecturally, laying out some of the larger buildings by the commercial areas, the single-family residentials up on the plan north by the single-family residential, by the single-family. Raise it up. Can you hear me now? All right. Yeah, so I think, for this early study, we're kind of looking at how we can tie into the larger context overall. In the next slide, you see here, we start laying certain elements on there, circulation, open space, how that also ties into the larger context, as Don mentioned previously with Evergreen Walk. The big part of our, the big design here is the green ribbon that we tie into and that connects to the Evergreen Walk Trail. That's that thick green line that you see going through the site. With that, it gives us an opportunity to look at how we can integrate open space in there, both, public and private open spaces, strategically placing it on there for people to utilize it. Other opportunities that come up here, we look at potential green infrastructure. You can see in the blue, those are some stormwater basins that could be there. They're a great natural element that could be integrated as part of a trail system, that plays out as, again, continuing from the Evergreen Trail. And then other things we looked at where appropriate are the vegetation buffers along the perimeters that you can see in the very light green by the single-family residential, screening where appropriate to the context, what's within the site, what's outside our site. And then that's the same in the plan south. And that also, gives us an opportunity to put and integrate that trail in there as well along the perimeter. And it's also, we can look at preserving some existing trees. I think we can look at how we can maximize that at the same time creating a screening. And then the next step beyond what you just saw is how this can kind of come together. There's multiple green open spaces, like I mentioned, public and private. They're kind of all mixed in together. Bringing back from the first slide that you saw that I talked about, the architectural element, how that ties in with the landscape component. But yeah, this is kind of the big picture, and then we're also exploring different options to see what could be maximized here in terms of utilizing the site with the natural features that are already there and how we can tie into the larger overall context like we've been trying to emphasize with this whole project. So I'm gonna turn it back to Don. Thank you.
We wanted to make sure that our presentation was...
Introduce yourself again every time you speak.
Oh, my apologies. Don Poland, Goldman York Property Advisors. We wanted to make sure we keep this presentation brief to give an opportunity for discussion. And we're more than welcome to go back to slides and answer any questions when we complete. So we took a deep dive look at your budgets, your education budgets, your municipal budgets. Also took a deep dive look at the Board of Ed's consultant reports on enrollments. I've been following those reports since 2016 now, I believe, on a yearly basis. And we wanted to talk a bit about kind of school enrollments and ultimately fiscal impacts, knowing that those are of great concern to the community and to yourselves. Just to provide some context, your 2023-2024 enrollments, I believe that's as of October 1st, this past October, is 5,002 students. That's still 90 fewer than your peak enrollments that was in the 2002-2003 school year. So yes, you guys have a growing school district. It has been growing since approximately 2015, 2016. But it had been almost 1,000 students below that peak from the early 2000s, and it is now returning to that level. District is expected, and this is from your consultant report from the SLAM report to the Board of Ed. This is not me telling you. This data is from them. The report identifies that the district's expected to keep growing, but growth will level off in the next few years. And elementary school populations already projected to remain flat. And I think that's one of the more interesting aspects of the report is this flattening of elementary school enrollments. In the SLAM report, they continually compare, and rightfully so, compare South Windsor to the other, I'll say, prosperous and successful school districts within the Hartford region, Avon, Simsbury, Glastonbury, West Hartford, Granby, and so forth. And they know that those districts have been either stagnant in their enrollment growth or contracting, in that South Windsor is the only district that has been growing. And I think that's an important thing to recognize, and it relates directly to that leveling off of the school age, of the elementary school students, and I'll come back to that in just a moment. So the report also identifies that turnover in existing housing stock continues to fuel school children and school enrollments, including both single-family and condominiums. Year over year from 2016, that's been a finding of the report. The primary driver of enrollments is turnover in existing housing stock. In the most recent developments that have occurred, I believe going back to 2015, multifamily housing has generated 0.21 students per unit, while single family has generated 0.11 students per unit, and condos have generated 0.82 students per unit. So multifamily has been the lowest and significantly lower than single-family residential development. Also important to note is that multifamily apartments developments account for 53% of your housing permits issued since 2016, but only account for 14% of the increases in school enrollments. And actually, one of your consultant reports on the POCD related to development notes that actually it's, since 2013, it's 50% of housing permits have been multifamily. This is actually following statewide trends. If you go back to 2006, only about 22% of housing permits in Connecticut were multifamily, and over the past 6 or 7 years, approximately 47% of all housing permits statewide have been multifamily. This is a change in demographics. This is a change in housing market. It's not just something unique to South Windsor. The point I want to get back to about that declining birth rate is ultimately related to why is it that those other prosperous communities are stagnating or declining on enrollments and South Windsor is increasing? And in the SLAM consultant report, it actually talks about home values, and it shows that your home values have increased significantly. That if you go back to around, say, 2016, your home values were in the mid to high 200,000s. And if you look at today's sales, the average sales price in South Windsor is just shy of $350,000. I took a look at census data from 2020, and of the 7 communities, prosperous, successful school districts, Avon, Simsbury, and the others in South Windsor, you guys have been the most inexpensive or the least expensive housing market out of all of them. In 2020, your median home value was less than $300,000. It was around $292,000. Avon was the highest at $395,000. The fact is, you have been an accessible first-time homebuyer market. Under $300,000 is a first-time homebuyer market. Those other communities have not. They've been expensive, and they've been out of the reach of most first-time homebuyers. But as the SLAM report shows, I believe it's page 9, your home values have escalated with COVID, and that your median sales value is now just shy of $350,000. You are no longer a first-time homebuyer market. Hence, why are birth rates slowing, as shown in the SLAM report, and why are enrollments in the elementary schools flattening? There's your answer. Single-family homes have been driving the enrollments in town, and ultimately, it's the first-time home buyers, the young couples with children, that have been fueling that. And that is now slowing because you are no longer a first-time home buyer market. So we took a look at taxes, and I know there's always this question, about the impacts of taxes, single-family taxes versus multifamily taxes and so forth. So using $350,000 as kind of a median sales value or home value in South Windsor, a $350,000 house pays approximately $10,000 a year in property taxes. Just less than that, it's like $9,800 or something, based on the current mill rate. A condominium pays, on average, probably around $7,000, give or take. And our estimates, consistent based on what per unit value of taxes at Tempo at Evergreen are, those units are paying approximately $4,000 per unit in taxes to the town. So it sounds like, apartment units pay so little, yet, we get these school-age children and we're spending X number of dollars a year on enrollments. But the fact is, when you do it per enrollment per unit, when you use that as a multiplier, recognizing that apartments produce far fewer students, then ultimately the per student taxes out of a single family property is around $9,000. The per student out of a condo is around, I can't read my own numbers there, is around, I believe, $8,000. And the per student taxes tax value per student at 0.21 on apartments is $19,000. Essentially, you have 5 units paying taxes for the equivalent of one school-age student. So we looked at real property taxes projected for, we're using, this is an estimated number, but 684 units. Only 478 of which would be producing school-age children because we conceptualize a third of the development, at least in units, as being age-restricted and not containing students. We also projected, and we used the Tempo value of taxes of $4,000 per unit, and come up with $2.7 million in property taxes. We then looked at personal property taxes on motor vehicles. We also looked at sewer user fees. We then calculated per unit, per pupil expenditures for new additional students at $10,500 an enrollment. Just so you know, the 22-23 superintendent's budget report provides the number of new enrollments and the total cost of those enrollments. $801,000 total cost for 129 new enrollments. That works out to $6,200 per new enrollment in actual cost to the school district. We're using $10,500, so we're extremely conservative compared to your own school district numbers. And we also calculated the cost of general government services. And ultimately, we arrive in a place where the development will generate, between taxes and user fees, about $3.9 million in taxes. It will cost approximately I can see there better, approximately my first number was $3.3 million in taxes, $900,000 in government expenditures to a net fiscal positive of approximately $2.5 million. A key takeaway on this, it's actually noted, I believe, on my slide above here, is apartments are subsidizing the cost of school enrollments, given the low number of generation and tax burden. Single-family residential units don't generate enough taxes to cover the students coming out of them, nor do the condo units. But the multifamily apartments in your town are generating four to five times the amount of taxes as the services they are collecting. So if you had no new multifamily development to date, you would actually be in a much worse fiscal sense in the context of a Board of Ed budget, recognizing that only 14% of new enrollments are coming from multifamily, and multifamilies are paying 5 times the amount of taxes as to the school services they're accessing. So with that, I will turn it back to John if he has any concluding comments, but we'd really like your input, your thoughts. This is an opportunity for you to give us direction as we work towards, formalizing some type of application, hopefully. Thank you.
And yes, that really does conclude our presentation, but wanted to keep it brief and give you an overview. But I do want to reinforce something here in the plans. Again, all very conceptual, all just meant to demonstrate what a development could look like. But we don't really have a mouse. The units, Don mentioned this, but to be clear, the units in the yellow to the left were meant to be.
Excuse me, what page is that?
Page 5.
Thank you.
The units to the left in yellow were intended to be multifamily units, like market rate plus an affordable requirement. The units in the orange to the right were intended to be an active adult community.
Excuse me, could you start over?
Oh, sorry,
I want to be able to understand you, and I'm having a hard time understanding what you're saying.
Yeah, you got it.
Because your sentence is running all together. If you could maybe enunciate just a little bit more, I'd appreciate it.
You got it.
Thank you.
Not the first time I've been told to slow down. Page 5, I just wanted to reinforce that this is just a concept plan to demonstrate how a multifamily development could look, and especially adding in the open space, public space, natural components that were described. To reinforce, the area in the left, in yellow, was meant to be a multifamily development, about 2/3 of the units, market rate with any required affordable units there. The units to the right, in the orange, were intended to be an active adult, age-restricted component, which would be about 1/3 of the units, just as we were drawn up in this concept plan. And that concludes what we had intended to show. So we'd love to answer questions or continue a discussion, however you would like to proceed.
Before I ask the commissioners, how many units are we talking about?
We made an assumption here for density, just based on the density of the site at 57 acres of 12 units per acre, which in terms of multifamily developments is pretty reasonable in this part of the state. So that would equate to 684 units, which...
And the small squares on your diagram on page 5?
684 units in total, and the small squares on page 5. Yes. Oh, the small squares. The orange in a age-restricted, active adult community, the orange blocks would be sort of typical apartment buildings. The small squares would be a sort of cottage-style product that those would tend to offer.
All right, thank you. So I think what we'll do is let each commissioner ask you questions in order. I can address any of you, and so let's see. We'll start with Commissioner Boganski.
I don't have any comments right now. Thanks.
Commissioner Willett.
I have a few questions. So 684 units, how many in yellow versus orange?
The yellow are I use broad brush. Market rate, about 2/3. That equates to 478. Most likely those would be built in phases.
So 478 in yellow, and the remainder 210 or so, whatever it is. 104.
230.
Oh, 210.
Yes,
All right,
correct.
so 210.
Yes.
Will be 55 plus, age restricted.
Correct.
Okay. Second question, your stats in here, or whoever it was that was quoting SLAM. and the number of students per new unit. You mentioned a number of 2013, which is when you said the period was starting in 2013 to today. So 10-year look back. How many of those units in that equation are 55 plus? So the point is, we've had a plethora of 55 plus units put in town, which are diluting the student ratio. If you're adding 400, I'd like to know, of the units added in town that are not age restricted, what are the student ratios there?
So in the SLAM reports from 2016 on to this year, 2023-24, they have accounted for all units, single family, multifamily, and including age restricted. And they have accounted for the enrollment generations from the units that can generate, not the age restricted.
So it does not include 55
Right.
pluses?
And those numbers have fluctuated between 0.13 students per unit and approximately 0.19 per unit over the course of almost all of the rentals, apartment rentals, over all of those years. I will state, though, this 23-24 report does show that tempo has spiked a little bit. It's at 0.24 right now, while one of the others is at 0.12. So in general, the numbers have been around 0.17, 0.18. We used 0.21. We lean towards the higher end. My guess is tempo may spike to 0.26. It more likely will drop back down like 0.2. So we use 0.21 as a reasonable number that's well within the range, at the higher end of the range, of your existing generations from units.
Okay, and then on page 7, your remaining flat chart,
Yes.
okay? Do your projections include the impact of Deming and Geisler's?
So those are SLAM's projections. They're not mine, just to be clear. The SLAM report does 3 projections, a high, a medium, and a low. That is the medium. They recommend using the middle. The low shows you guys flattening and contracting. The high shows you growing further. They recommend watch and monitor both. It includes, they take a bunch of data sets, existing birth rates, the survival rate from birth to entering kindergarten, how many students make it that far. And they also take into account historical building permits, the trends that are going on with those building permits, and they take into account, really specifically, all recent and existing developments in their generation of enrollments to come up ultimately with their projections. I've generally felt throughout this period, and I know I've expressed this previously, that I feel that their projections have been maybe a bit over-projected. In this most recent year, I think they have reasonable projections. I personally, based on what I talked about with where your price point of housing has gone, with the leveling off of the elementary enrollments, I personally think you're leaning probably towards the lower side of that middle projection rather than the higher side. But those are reasonable projections and they account for everything.
But just to be clear, this chart going 24 out does not include the expected units in tempo, what will happen at Geisler's.
It does.
It does.
They take those into account. They work those into their projections. They say there's this many units that are approved, and based on our historic data of what we know enrollments are coming out, they take those into account when projecting forward. So, and it's actually been one of my complaints, like Geisler has reoccurred as projected units over, 3 years now? 3 cycles of those reports. So there's always units lingering out there that just aren't getting built. And from my perspective, they inflate the projection because there's an assumption they're all going to get built. I'm not saying Geisler's not going to get built. I'm just saying Geisler, continues to pause. So we don't know when those units will come online, but they do make a factoring for them, and they do capture them, and they do use them in the projection moving forward.
All right, I'll have to go look at the SLAM report. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, you really do. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's a great report. If you, I made this, I kind of assume you've seen it, but it just came out early December. I know the holidays, but I really recommend for the commission to take a look at it.
I have other questions. Eventually, we'll get to it. The exit between ABC and Joann's, adding another exit or entrance on the other side of the hotel, is that appropriate for families with such a busy commercial area and
Could you bring your
retail area?
mic a little closer?
No, so, just, the only other concern, and we'll discuss later, is the exit onto Pleasant Valley from in between ABC and Joann, and then adding is it one or two more exits? One more or two more to the left of the hotel?
Yep. So, traffic remains to be studied, but based on our architects and our planners' opinions to date, we believe we could accommodate through the existing intersection, which is what I believe you're referring to here, on the far side of the hotel, right?
Well, there's two. There's one on the right side of ABC, which actually they connect in the back.
Oh, yeah.
So
They
there's
connect in the back,
two
that's right.
entrances.
But to the residential, we would propose sort of one point from that area, right? On the sort of, I want to say, far end of the shopping center, okay? Moving into the project from there. And what you're trying to do there is take advantage of an existing signalized intersection, right? And then in addition, it felt that that there was a need to have something on Wheeler Road. But ideally, we are limiting the number of new curb cuts, and utilizing what we can from what's existing today, like this intersection here on Pleasant Valley.
Okay, thank you. No
And
further
again,
questions.
much remains to be studied, but that would be.
Yeah, it's a quick question.
Commissioner LeBlanc, yeah.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of units. How many stories are the yellow buildings? How many stories high are you going?
These units, when we say garden style, are a product that we haven't fleshed out the design too much, but it's a product that you've seen. They're typically 3 to 4 stories. You can see here in the plans demonstrate the parking would be on the surface, and sort of straightforward kind of individual buildings that could be phased or built.
All right, so what height and area, you're basically doing what Tempo did over at Evergreen Walk, more or less? Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. I have nothing else right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Pesaconis.
Thank you. When you initially showed your presentation, you had this colored as the same color as all the other multifamily neighborhoods. But I believe this is the design commercial zone? 55 acres or 57 acres of design commercial. I don't believe that this type of development is currently allowed in this zone. I'm not sure if you mentioned that or not.
Correct.
Part of our plan of conservation and development, we currently have 468 acres in our commercial zones. That includes the general commercial, the restricted commercial, and the design commercial. So if you were to take 55 acres of that, you would be more or less wiping out 10 to 12% of our commercial area in town, designated commercial area. Right now, land use in our town, 82% of it is used as residential. and 18% is used as commercial or industrial areas. So you're talking about taking a substantial amount of commercial area currently and making it into residential. And there's a lot of ramifications for that. Our tax base would be more dependent on residential. And way back when Matt Galligan got here, that was one of his big points that I picked up on a long time ago, is you want to have a higher industrial and commercial tax base to offset some of the residential cost for tax. And it's been grown throughout the years, but I'm looking at that as a setback. That's not a positive thing for this town. As far as the numbers, that's a lot of units. It seems you focused a lot on the economic part of it, and it's going to be a $2.5 million plus for the town. But I don't know if that addresses all the impacts. I mean, you're also talking about there's a lot of natural vegetative berms, especially on Wheeler Road, that, if I'm reading your plans right, would just plain be eliminated.
No. We've taken those berms into consideration within the designs. I mean, these are really conceptual, but there were discussions with staff. Staff made us aware of those berms, history of those berms, and so forth. And the designs of those, the conceptuals at this point have taken those into consideration, and every effort would be made to preserve the overwhelming majority of those berms. May there be a place where a berm has to be cut through to provide access? Yes, that's possible. But in general, the berms would be preserved.
Okay, well, I've seen your walking trail right where the berms are. So unless your walking trail's on top of the berms, I lived across the street from this project for 20 years. So I watched those berms grow their vegetation. You've also got the current Hampton Inn, which is one of the properties on the other adjoining lot that I believe you guys also own, correct?
But it's sort of generally considered part of we do not own the hotel. Let me get to best.
Okay, well, regardless, as you look on the aerial that's been shown to us, there's currently like a dozen tractor trailers that are parked on that road now. And that hotel really needs to do something because they don't have any trailer truck parking right now. And that would be a hazard for anybody who's going to be living in this potential complex if it does go forward. I see a lot of wetlands on your map, and I'm guessing that those are to collect the runoff from all the paved parking areas?
Yeah, again, these are, schematic, but we would intend to do some kind of green infrastructure that would collect stormwater runoff.
Okay. As far as the numbers, I've always felt that our predictions for numbers have always been lower than what they should be, dating way back to when we first started getting this problem. And as far as the SLAM report and having the elementary schools level off and for I don't know, like a dozen years, and for the town to still be growing, it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense. But that's what I got to say right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Dexter?
Chairman, may I respond to
Sure,
some of the
yes, of
zoning
course.
questions? To some of the zoning comments at the beginning of his remarks?
Yes.
One is, yes, we're aware it's commercial zoned. And that's part of the reason why we're here. We recognize the first step in any application process would be either a map amendment or a text amendment that currently, this kind of development couldn't move forward. We do recognize that it takes away, and you said 12% or so of your commercial zones. But I also want to be clear that COVID probably took away 40% of commercial demand across various asset classes. That is, the demand for office is non-existent. The demand for retail is very marginal, depending on certain categories. That the potential for commercial land to develop today is very slim. Viable asset class that could be developed there, warehouse distribution, but we also know that's probably a very big non-starter at that site. So this is a viable use. I also want to be clear that from a land use perspective, multifamily residential is considered residential. From a real estate asset class perspective, multifamily is a commercial development. It's a commercial asset. If you put, in general, starting point, this is very rough numbers, but for commercial retail development in the greater Hartford area, if a client came in and asked me kind of fiscal impacts, yada, 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 I would start with an estimate of $3 per square foot in taxes. Maybe a little higher, could push up to $350, $360, may push a little lower, $345, depending on the local mill rate, depending on the specific site, so forth and so on. But if we just use $3 a square foot, drop a 200,000 square foot retail development, right, times 3. $600,000 in real property taxes would be generated from a 200,000 square foot commercial development. This development will generate 2.7, I forgot my numbers, 2.7 million in real property taxes. That is a huge difference. The value of multifamily residential far exceeds that of commercial. And that's why you arrive at that fiscal positive. That's why, multifamily residential pays far more than its weight in services that it actually grabs from. If we were talking about industrial, let's go back to the distribution center, then you're going to drop to probably about $1.75 to $2 a square foot in real property taxes on a distribution center. So from an asset class perspective, multifamily is very high valued, very high taxes. Thank you.
Commissioner Dexter?
Looking at the fiscal impact page, I now understand for the revenue user fees, the 684 is the number of units.
Yes.
Then the next bulleted bold statement says projected school district enrollment. Is that 50 students, 50 new to school students
50 new to district
from
students.
684 units?
Right. Remember, 200 and approximately 6 of which are age restricted.
And when you say age restricted, 55?
55
So
and
you're
older.
saying a 55-year-old can't have a grandchild in their house?
It's complicated. One is, well, no,
Enlighten me.
no. It's federal law that governs age-restricted housing. 55 and older requires that at least one person be 55 years of age and older. I believe your regulations may require 62 and over, or am I confusing you guys? No? Okay, scratch that. But I believe, and you can correct me, Michelle, I don't deal with these every day on the regulatory side like that, but you're not allowed to have someone under the age of 18 in a 55 and older unit. However, there are carve-outs for persons with disabilities and so forth and so on. So theoretically, there should be no school-aged children in such development. May there be an occasional age-restricted development. May there be age-restricted developments that occasionally have 1 or 2 students. Yeah, it's possible, but it's not common at all. I've never
So
encountered
school
it.
buses would not be allowed into that area to pick up that one kid, or would that?
Your rules on school buses are going to
I'm
be governed
just-
by the bus company and the
Yeah.
school district. I can't comment to
Okay.
those rules.
My
but-
only other thought is about town services.
Yep.
We know that, we're 2 apartments away from a paid fire department. We have our police, our first responders to any 911 call. That's just how we operate here. So we are very heavy laden with those 2 specific departments. We have a community center that's, full. We have issues. Any idea what type of demand this would create for the town as far as town services, other than dollars
Well,
sent?
first off, I think it's important to recognize that growing pains are actually a good thing. I know they're growing pains. I work in a lot of communities. A lot of my career is focused on what I call weak and distressed market communities that have no demand. No one wants to move there. People are moving away. They're contracting in population. They're contracting in enrollments. I recently, a school district, for 5,000, was it for 5,000 students? They have 1,800 remaining now. Their high school can house the whole district now. The high school was built for 2,200 students. So my first point is growing pains are actually, I know they're painful, but they're actually a good problem for a community to have. As far as demand, we do take that into consideration, the, additional services when making those calculations on the cost to local government. At the end of the day, most new development is being absorbed into the existing structure without creating new demand. That is, every new car that's being registered and taxed isn't causing, an additional person to be hired in the tax collector's office. Every new house doesn't require an additional fire truck. Every new student doesn't require an additional teacher. The overwhelming majority is being absorbed. And this is not unique to South Windsor, this is something across Connecticut. We have this aversion to growth, and we have this aversion to school-aged children and the cost of school-aged children. And it's resulted in an aversion to multifamily housing. And for me, I know it's tough for you guys. I come up here and I say these things and they don't comport with kind of those growing pain challenges. But at the end of the day, from a fiscal perspective, multifamily residential development, when it's predominantly 1 and 2 bedroom units, and when it's also in portion of it being age restricted, is your most profitable tax use. It's paying far more taxes than the services it will ever require. So if you think about my earlier statement, 53% of your new development since 2016 has been multifamily. But only 14% of your new school enrollments are associated with those multifamily units. It is subsidizing the tax burden being created by the single-family residential that's being built. It's helping you guys along. If you took away that 53%, all of those multifamily units, if you took away the fiscal positive, what is there, 200 units at Tempo at $4,000 per unit, that's $800,000. They're probably using about $250,000 in services. There's $400,000 or $500,000 there that is actually helping to fund those growing pains because they're not using those services. And I don't know how else to say it. At the end of the day, you'll choose whether or not to agree with me, and that's fine. But I do this over and over. I work for both municipalities and developers. My advice is never any different. My findings follow the data. And for client communities, East Granby being a recent one, my advice was embrace multifamily. You need more of it. It's going to fund your budget.
That's all I have.
Okay, Commissioner Foley?
John, quick question for you. You own the plaza, the Joann's Fabric, the plaza in front of this
Yes.
property, right?
Yes, we do. Not all of it, as I was saying before, but we own the bulk of the property here. We do
Okay,
not own the
just
hotel.
out of curiosity, what do you pay in taxes to Manchester for that plaza?
Oh, I'd have to look that up, but I certainly could as part of this.
Get me close. Come on.
Okay. You're gonna make me do this on the spot.
I'll
now.
check tomorrow, but you can get me close.
I think it's around 400,000 to 400,000 square feet. I think the taxes are in the range of $3 a foot, so give or take, $1 million, $1.2 million in taxes is what I would speculate off the top of my head.
Okay. And then Don, quick question for you. So you're saying, I mean, it's your job to always just kind of sell the goods. But we've never, let's say Tempo, when they came in front of us, they said, listen, people aren't gonna have, 0.12 of a child. And we're supposed to have 7 students come out of that facility. Do you know how many we got now?
At 0.24, I would say you have 48 students. That would be my guess.
Yeah, but they told us 7.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
however that works out. South Windsor Woods, you're familiar with that development in South Windsor?
I am familiar with the development,
That's
not the approval.
multifamily.
Yep.
Do you know how many students come out of that facility?
Off the top of my head, no. I know I've looked at the number a dozen times.
Again, we keep getting sold that people are only gonna have 0.1 something of a child.
Yep.
Never works out in our favor. Works out with the developers, but it never works out for us. And again, what you're coming here to ask us to do is change the zone, right?
Yep.
We put these in place for a reason, and that's, no matter what, I mean, I'd like to talk to somebody at SLAM, because I don't believe $10,500, $10,511 covers a student.
That's my number, not Slam's.
Your number's wrong. So,
Your superintendent says it's 6,200 per student.
It's 16,531 according to the state.
No, just hear me out. That's dividing the total budget by the total enrollments, gives you that total number. The 22-23 budget proposal presentation from your superintendent to the Board of Ed talks about the burden created by new enrollments. And it says the district in this budget year will have an additional $801,000 in costs associated with new enrollments. And there are 129 new enrollments. That's $6,200 in change per enrollments. That's the actual cost, because you're not hiring a new superintendent. Your utilities aren't changing in their costs.
but as
So-
the enrollment goes up, Don,
And I'm using
you're
far
adding
higher.
teachers, okay?
It does.
We're bringing in modular, so things change.
They do.
It is not $6,200, and it is not $10,511. You're way short, okay? So I don't take any of this at all. Like, I can't accept it, because we've been down this highway way too many times in this town. We get smoked every time. My opinion is it's zoned for what it is, and we leave it as is.
Thank you.
Commissioner Viteri.
I apologize if you had said this before and I missed it. The percentage of this that'll be affordable housing.
It'll be based on your regulations. I keep on reading them as 15%. Michelle keeps on telling me it's 18%. But whatever your regulations require for affordable component will be included within this development.
It does range from 10 to 18, depending on what type of housing it is.
Okay, thank you.
And then how many, what percent, what was the number that you said were age restricted?
So I believe, now remember that 684 is a starting point number for us. It could go higher, it could go lower, it could go nowhere. We'll see how that turns out. But I believe approximately 206 are age restricted and 478 are market, not age restricted.
So then out of those 478, you're saying you would get a total of 50 students?
50
So
new to district out of the 478.
one student for every 10 units.
1.21 students per unit, so 2.1 students per 10 units.
But that doesn't, if you were getting
The new
2.1 per 10 units, then you'd be considerably higher than 50.
Yes, that's the 100, so it would be 100 total enrollments. 50% are calculated at new to district. Once again, SLAM's study of your existing school enrollments show a fluctuation between approximately 15% and 30% new to district on a yearly basis out of new developments. We're using a 50% to one, just be conservative, because I never want to overpromise. Unfortunately, the developments I've been here on, none of them have been constructed yet, so we can't talk about my numbers, but I never want to overpromise, so we use 50% to be conservative, and we also assume in that 50% that if someone vacates a unit elsewhere in town to move into a unit in the new development, that there may be a backfill enrollment into that unit. So we're providing a cushion there, and we're pretty confident with that number.
All right. I'm not sure I completely follow, but okay. Slightly different. There's a single point of egress, and that's the one on Pleasant Valley?
There is a point of egress on Pleasant Valley. There's a point of egress on Wheeler. Once again, conceptual, traffic studies, site plan design. I would assume even the state, OSTA, is going to have a say in this. Access ways and number of accesses are subject to change.
No, okay, because I was thinking for 684 units, to have a single point was going to be kind of bizarre, but
Yep.
Going to Wheeler, which then would put him back on a Pleasant Valley Road, seems to be quite a flow there with the highway entrance. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cavanero.
So I do have a few questions, a few comments. I do want to run through them. The very first thing I do want to note out before I forget, I'm going to read off the address to you. I want to make sure I'm reading it correctly. 367 Smith Street. Do you guys own that property? Because I see that as the access point on the eastern side on Smith Street there. Okay, because I saw on Google Maps that there's a house there, so I assume that's going to get knocked down in the process. All right. So outside of that, just want to clarify. So on the western side, you have the market rate units, 478 of them, and then on the eastern side, you have the senior housing age-restricted facilities. So again, that's going to add up to 684. In my mind, I'm trying to ballpark this. If there's 684 units, I'm going to assume that's going to be around 2,000 people. I could be wrong. I'm just guessing here. Yeah, give or take. I'm just guessing. So my concern here is, you know, I see a lot of parking, and I know we live in a car-dependent society, so I'm really curious if there's going to be any efforts made to work with the DOT to either get a bus line through here. I'm not sure if there's any restrictions. Like I said, 2,000 people, all clustered together in that plot. I would love to see some effort to work with the DOT to reduce the amount of cars going in and out. I know that there's not a lot of people that use the bus in South Windsor, but that's also because there's not much access to it. There's not a lot of sidewalks to it, or it's a hilly area to try and get to. If we have a bus running through here, there's a good possibility that there's a chunk of people that may not use the car and may use the bus. So that's sort of my concern when I look at this, sort of the car dependency of it. Outside of that, some of the other concerns that I do have, or at least questions, I'm curious if there's going to be any efforts, or let me back it up, any sustainable features added here. So for example, I don't think you're going to have solar. That's not what I'm asking, but more rather, we talk about the either, let's say, detention basins, for example, or maybe some rain gardens, or maybe even a community garden, for example, because I'm thinking about food insecurity. But I know that there's the plaza right there to the south. I don't see a walking connection to it. It looks a little separated. So I'm just curious if you guys would be willing to explore the concept of having some sort of small community garden where the residents here could utilize. Because like I said, 2,000 people, ballpark it. You know, there will be traction around that. I think that'd be a good use for a lot of the green space there.
I think everything you said is on the table as we move through design, whether it be buses, alternative modes of transportation, trail connections to Evergreen Walk, trail connections, which have been discussed over to the plaza at Buckland Hills, everything, you know, on the eco side, low impact design, you know, the catching and filtering stormwater drainage, not putting it into a pipe and so forth, community gardens. I think all of that is on the table. We just don't get there without other steps first, but we will get there.
Yeah, I just want to bring it up now, make sure it's on the minutes. You guys can refer to it later.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, of course. So outside of that, like I said, I mentioned trying to work with the DOT. I mean, I've, for work, I went down to Southington for a presentation for their transportation committee, and from what I got the gist of it, it took them 4 years to work state DOT to drag the bus line down from Bristol into Southington for their downtown area, so that's why I mentioned it now. I know there's a chance you guys may return 12 months from now, so I know it'll take a while to work with them, from what I've heard. Outside of that, I assume, you know, bike racks as well. That's always been a big thing I've been pushing for. I know that's long down the road, just mentioning it now. Outside of that, I think the only thing I do want to mention, part of this, again, we mentioned the affordability. I know you mentioned that you're just going to do what the regulations say. Has there been any thought of trying to explore the low-income housing tax credit at all? The either 9% or the 4% for at least one of the buildings there? Because I see there are 6 buildings in the market rate garden style area. I'm not sure if you'd be willing to explore just having one of those be. Yeah, just curious on that.
I think my statement before was not saying we're going to do the bare minimum of the regulations, but that we would comply with the regulations. And that includes consideration of all affordable options up to 80% AMI is required by state law and required by your regs. Yeah, it's something we can explore if the funding mechanism were to make sense.
Okay, and then the very last question is, I just want to confirm, every single unit here, the 684, are those all going to be renter occupied, or is it going to be split between owner occupied and renter occupied?
I think that's yet to be determined. At the end of the day, the apartments would be renter occupied. What the age restricted side ends up being, whether it's condo or rental, once again, will probably be determined by market demand for those units. And I would say there's probably the possibility for something hybrid, where maybe the garden style buildings on that side were rental and the cottages were condoed. So it's still a moving, you know, it's still a work in progress, so.
Yeah, of course, and I asked that because I know we just talked about South Windsor Woods, and one of the reasons I should say, why that we see a lot of traction out of there for school-age children is that, you know, it's a mix of condos. It's not just apartment complexes, and we've seen it with other projects that have come forward with us. We look at the table and we see the ones that are for rent, just the apartment complexes. They produce the least amount of school children per unit. And so that's sort of why I ask, because if that is our concern, then we should at least be willing to come to terms with some sort of solution rather than flagging it off as no. That's just my only thing there.
Yeah, and that's an astute recognition. At the end of the day, owner occupancy almost always generates higher enrollments than rental. Once again, talking about the owner occupancy option would be on the age-restricted side. So once again, we wouldn't anticipate school-age children on that side of the development.
Yeah, one or two more things, just quick comments now. I do like how it's not 100% on either side between just market rate, you know, non-age restricted and age restricted. I like the nice, healthy balance, you know. When we talk about an affordable housing plan, you know, to diversify our housing stock, part of that entails not restricting to age, and part of it, restricting it to age, and, having the opportunity here to restrict part of it and leave both sides open rather than saying, no, we're going to restrict it to all age all at once and vice versa. It's good that we are giving the option, so anyone that wants to live there does have the opportunity to live there. After that, I'll keep an open mind to this. I mean, I'm not going to say no right off the bat. I mean, we're still in discussion. I'm aware that you could come back a month or two from now with different plans. So, I mean, with changing times, there's some things that will change in the town. So I will keep an open mind to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bernstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on our agenda, this was presented as a concept meeting, and you've brought a concept to us. But Don, in a lot of your comments and in the presentation, the focus seems to be on generating tax revenue for the town. And you've given us a lot of statistics to demonstrate to us that what you have here probably maximizes tax revenue. And I guess I look at that and I think to myself, my role as a commissioner, is it to look at the town as a business? And my answer is no. My role as a commissioner is to do what's in the best interest of the 10,000 households and 25,000 residents of South Windsor. So I don't know if 684 new units here is that. I don't know if it's something industrial. I don't know if it's something commercial, but did you consider those other options? And I would like to hear a little bit about that if you did.
Yeah, we considered those options. First and foremost, I mean, I started off when I talked about the context of this site. And if I go back to this map, yeah, it's commercial. And yeah, back 40 years ago when you created that zoning designation, with what was going on, development in this area, the desire for retail and or office made sense. I don't deny that past decision or those past conditions. But what we do know is a number of people have tried over the years to get that site approved on the commercial side, and they've fallen short. It hasn't happened. It's decades on now and it hasn't developed. And the market has ultimately changed. You're not going to attract office to that site. The office market in the central Connecticut region is essentially dead. And we are looking at probably 10 years before we even figure out where it is. That's number one. On the retail asset side, the site has no visibility. Once you hit that intersection at Wheeler there, the traffic, or at the hotel there, the traffic counts just plummet on Pleasant Valley. It's not the traffic counts that you have out in front of Buckland Hills. It's not the Buckland Plaza. It's not the traffic counts out on the main road and so forth. So it doesn't have the traffic counts that we need for retail, and it's tucked in behind something. It doesn't have the visibility that's needed for retail. There was some attempts to look at a major retailer who's more of a destination draw, but they didn't show interest in the site. The other asset class that we explored is ultimately, the logistics sites, the distribution centers. And to be honest with you, yeah, that site could work. Easy access to the highway, right next door to the JCPenney's. I know it's not JCPenney's anymore. But right next to that site, great place for logistics. But I also stood in front of you guys a few years ago for a logistics site. And I think your appetite for a logistics site, I'm not sure is any better than, your other appetites on the residential. And to be honest with you, a logistics site with that high density multifamily already adjacent to that site would be pretty intrusive. So as we work through the asset classes, the fact is we don't have a lot of opportunities. And the other thing we did look at was mixed use. Could we get some commercial in there with multifamily development? And the answer at the end of the day is no. The site just doesn't work in this day and age, doesn't work in this economy. So that's why we're here. Believe me, our option is not to start with a zone change.
Yeah. So what I'm going to take away is that in your professional opinions, this or some hybrid of this is the best opportunity. So I'm going to mimic what Commissioner Cavaniero said, and I'll withhold judgment. On the student population thing, I mean, you've gotten a lot of feedback. So I've been on this commission, I think, a little over 4 years, and I remember a meeting we attended with the Board of Education more than, I guess, about 2 years ago. And what we saw was a presentation that showed us a historical projection, and it was way off. So I think a lot of the comments you're getting is based on that. A lot of these folks were at that meeting, and I respect your background, and I know that you spend a lot of time dealing with data. I personally would not want to participate in a decision that had to do with student population without the Board of Education being involved. Because as I look at this, you deal with data, we might deal with data, they deal with people. And that's what matters. And you all know we just spent, millions and millions of dollars building new elementary schools. And what I think we're seeing here is we got to build another one now if this comes to fruition, or something along those lines, because we're maxed out. I found your comments about looking at the growth in South Windsor and comparing that to Avon Simsbury interesting, because I look at us, when I look at us compared to those towns, I see our proximity, our location to major highways being a much more advantageous thing than in some of these other towns. We also, for whatever reason, and you know this, we have had and continue to have this tremendous influx of Southeast Asian folks that are coming here for work, for whatever the case may be, and I'm not sure that's happening in these other places. So there's just so many unique dynamics here, and they're driving our home prices, they're driving the student population. So I would conclude by saying this is an interesting and good first step, so we'll see where this goes.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If I could just very quickly, I understand your guys' struggle with the data. I totally get it. Kevin, right? I get it. I understand it. I struggle with it too. I do it daily. Projections are a really tough thing to deal with. But at the end of the day, I think SLAM has done a good job. I think they're within the margins of errors. And I do remember back years ago being before you guys, and you guys yelled at me over using Rutgers. You didn't like the Rutgers studies or the Rutgers numbers. So I've stopped using them. I use your own data now, from your Board of Ed rather than the Rutgers stuff. Because at least it's your Board of Ed's data. It's not me, using an outside data source. So I'm really only using your own numbers against you. And I do want to know your numbers come in almost identical to Rutgers, so I could go either way on it. But I thank you guys, and I understand the struggle, and the feedback you've given so far is great. It's extremely helpful to us. And I really wish all applications could start at this point because you're helping to inform us. So if there's more questions or comments, we're willing to take them.
Actually, I neglected to ask our town director of planning if you have any comments. And also maybe you could review a little bit of the history here.
Sure. The long and short history of it, this has been zoned design commercial probably since I think sometime in the 70s. It was the original site for the mall back then, which was approved by South Windsor and was taken to court, and it was many years later before that was ever settled, and the mall happened to go up on top of the hill. So this is kind of a leftover zoning designation from a long time ago. What's unique about this kind of zoning designation, it's a 30-acre minimum site plan that you need to come in with, so it's not like you can come in and do a half acre, one building here. It's actually a 30-acre minimum. The other thing's just a comment about the history of this. To my knowledge, other than the early 90s when there was something that was denied and there was a litigated settlement, we've never had any real applications that have actually gone through the full-blown with the commission. There was a time when a Sam's and a Walmart looked at the site. I think there was some zoning text changes that we looked to do some years back. In cooperation with the applicant, we made some minor changes to the design commercial text. So it is a tough zoning classification. Like I said, it's like no other that we have in town. Having said that, knowing it was commercial, we did work on getting the berms that are currently out there today. Were developed in anticipation of commercial development, trying to protect our residential neighborhoods. So that's kind of the history of those berms from that perspective. What I do want to make clear is, we just went through this year-long moratorium with our residential housing. We came up with several new housing regulations. None of them would apply to this site. So no matter what direction you head, just to give you a quick example, our senior residence developments, which might be some of those single units you saw of senior, we limit a project to 25 units. I think I saw something like 50 here. If you're doing a multifamily development, we say maximum acreage is 15 acres. So my point is, we don't really have a zone to offer. We don't have a text to say, hey, come in under this. And I can appreciate Mr. Poland's comment that he'll meet our affordability. Again, our affordability kind of is different depending on the project type. So we're going to have some work to do creating regulations or zones or whatever approach the commission wants to take if you do want to pursue something like this. But it does have a very odd zoning history, not really conducive to coming with a site plan tomorrow on it. So I think when we did talk about it a little bit through our POCD discussions, we kind of said we'll open the door to discussions because understanding that it does have such an odd history. I don't know how helpful that is, but that's kind of the long and short of it. Thank you.
And our council liaison is here. You've heard all this wonderful stuff about taxes versus cost on the system. If you would like to comment,
So just for all of your sake, I don't think the estimate on the commercial taxes and the industrial taxes, it is aligned correctly. I was looking at our grand list and our top 25 taxpayers that are commercial and the assessed values of those properties. Remember that when we're assessing a commercial property, we're taking into consideration their equipment, right, their computers. So I'm going to use Distinctive Tree. All right, they are a huge, big taxpayer for us, but it's because they have huge pieces of equipment that are also taxed. So you've got to be careful with that $1.75 or $3 per square foot. Okay, it's not as straightforward as that. I think we have to be careful with the students. We've talked about this before. I also think that when we look at the acreage, generally we rule out anything that's wetlands, right? So that doesn't, when we were doing residential development, when we were doing our residential reforms, we take anything that's wetlands out of our regulations and say you can't use that for your ratios. So, some of that we need to think about when we talk about something like this. This is a lot of houses for this property. And again, from a tax perspective, I think we have to be very, very careful. We are stretched, our fire department, everything you guys said, so. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a few comments and questions, so I think probably Don will be the best one. When you talk about multifamily, you don't include condos in multifamily in your definition? I'm trying to remember. When we talk about multifamily, are we including condos?
We don't define the type of ownership when we talk about multifamily in our regulations.
So condos would be considered yeah. Okay.
Correct.
So when you talk about multifamily, you seem to be talking only about apartments of some sort.
Because the assumptions made on the enrollments, I'm in the rental category of, what your enrollment history has been in. I believe the desired product of the client in the end on the left side or the west side of the site is ultimately for rental apartments. The age-restricted one doesn't fall into the enrollment calculations, And two, it's at this point, I believe, a question mark as to whether it would be rental or ownership. So I'm not trying to lean in a certain direction, I'm just kind of playing with the plausibility of the site.
But your .21 really refers to apartment type.
Yep.
Your sewer fee calculation, actually, the sewer fees are different for apartments. They're lower. We did a study in the Water Pollution Control Authority, the amount of water that various uses are using, and we realized that apartments are not contributing the same per unit as single-family houses. So the number 415, actually we're 460 now, I think, it does not apply to apartments.
I'll go back and double check that. It is possible that if the WPCA, and I just don't remember in reviewing, if they were using a flow rate, I may have just chosen to go with the per unit at 415. But I'll double check that and make sure it's corrected in the future going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I just stepped down as the chair of the WPCA, so that's why I know this.
Fair enough.
But it's still a per unit.
Okay.
Well, we can talk, but I think you probably just look in there and you'll see that there's a minimum per apartment, and that's less than the single family.
Okay, we can adjust.
Does anyone remember, we just approved on Deming Street a 55-unit apartment development. Anyone remember how many trips we were getting per day, per peak? Was it like 20? But I mean, in the traffic report, was it like 21 peak in a peak hour for 55 units? So you're now doing maybe 12 times is that? So you're looking at 250, 300 trips in the peak when you do your traffic report. So we're going to have to think about what that means for not just coming out onto the highway, but a lot of those people will be going down Pleasant Valley Road, which is going to be an issue, I think.
Yeah, I mean, not only are you going to be concerned, but OSTA's going to be concerned, and traffic's probably one of the biggest hurdles, you know, to this site. So, agreed.
We talked about the zoning. Oh, I did drive around the outside of the property earlier, and on Smith Street, there are 3 decaying barns. They're probably tobacco barns. They're not shielded from anything. There's no fence. The only protection they have is a no trespassing sign. Many of the boards are missing. It would be very easy. I didn't go in, but it'd be very easy for a kid to cross Smith Street and go into those barns. I think that needs to be taken care of, aside from everything else we've talked about tonight. Wherever we go, that's got to be fixed. It's got to be fixed quickly. So they either need to be torn down or fenced in somehow so they don't present a danger. Because right now, those old collapsing barns, you don't know what an extra little burst of wind is going to do on one of those things.
Thank you.
I guess I am a little suspicious of the new to district calculation that you added, because I think you pointed out that really the ones who aren't new to district came from somewhere else in town, and somebody must have moved into where they came out of. So I wouldn't apply that 50%. I mean, they might be 50% new to district, but the actual increase in enrollment is going to be every single kid that shows up there, because the place they move out of may have more, more.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand it. At the same time, though, it's just when you look at, what'd you say? You have 10,000 housing units in town, give or take, 988 or whatever. You guys are generating what? If you have 5,000 enrollments, you're generating 0.5 per unit. So the fact is, a a large share of your existing housing stock as it turns over, whether it be rental or ownership, single family or multifamily, is remaining student or enrollment free. So I've put a lot of thought into this. I've done some numbers, and I feel pretty confident with that 50% that it's covering that margin. At the end of the day, I know someone made a comment about you don't understand like how elementary school enrollments could be flattening and stuff, and it's demographics. It's there's another way to count births. It's called fertility rates, and fertility rate in Connecticut in 2008 was 1.82. 1.83. Today it's 1.52. The fact is it goes down year over year. We marry later, we marry less, and we have fewer children than we have ever had previously as a society. Look at your population numbers. I told you your peak enrollment was 20 years ago, right? And you were 2,600 fewer total persons 20 years ago. And you still haven't gotten back to that peak enrollment. Why? Because society has changed. We marry later, we marry less, and we have fewer children. I grew up in a neighborhood that had houses with 9 kids in them and 1,400 square foot split levels. And those houses today are lucky if they have 1 kid. Most of them don't have any kids. It's a different world. So.
Okay, thank you. So, I would like to give anybody else on the board who has a comment or another question, just turn on your light and I'll recognize you. Commissioner Pesaconis?
Yeah, you're talking about roughly 200-plus units of adult units. Do you have any thought for the impact for the senior center or community room for these seniors? Is there a building that's dedicated to that?
Right. So one is I just also want to be clear, we have this kind of 2/3, 1/3 split on units. That's subject to change on feedback we're getting from you. That's subject to change on market conditions, on, as we proceed through this, what we figure out. So that number could go up, it could go down. That's number one. Number two, I think with most age-restricted facilities, there is a consideration towards, community assets within that development. So while they may not be plotted out specifically, the walking trails are a start at on-site recreation. May there be a common room, may there be pickleball courts, may there be those other things to meet the needs of those populations. I'd have to assume so. The multifamily marketplace is driven by amenities today. The places that compete and do the best are the ones that provide the most amount of services. So I have to assume when we get to that point of actual site plan and marketability, that those amenities would be drawn into it and it would be robust. And the end answer is, and hopefully reducing the ultimate impact on senior services, or at least mitigating impacts on senior services within the town of South Windsor, so.
Okay, because as one of the commissioners mentioned already, our senior services are taxed a lot right now. We have a very active senior community. Could you tell me how long, okay, your cul-de-sac was looking pretty long, but you have another outlet there to the south. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Any other, I can't see your light. Okay. I think this is very interesting. Haven't got a sense of how people are leaning. A couple of exceptions to that. I think we need to take the information you've given us. It's new to almost all of us. Take it and think about it and maybe have another discussion in a month or two to kind of give you stronger feedback, especially as we go through the POCD, which has a whole section on, or at least some section on this particular site. So I don't know if anyone else has any other
I
questions.
just have a real quick question. Michelle, just looking at the permitted uses for this zone, warehouses would not be permitted, so that would be a zone change if that was to come forward. But solar farms are part of there, right? I think that's a permitted
Solar,
use? Or a solar something.
it may be, I'd have to look at the use.
That
You
would
might be able to
nice.
freestand.
Don't, I know, don't. Solar.
It's worthy of our consideration. So I can tell you in the context of asset classes, I did not look at solar farms, but we can definitely look at it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that they are, I mean, solar farms really ought to be going in land that can't be used for anything else reasonable. So, I
It
mean, this
isn't,
is,
it's not a use allowed either, so, no.
What does that mean then, that solar thing?
Rooftop mounted solar would be allowed, but not a solar field, right? I'm on page 47.
Yes, I am.
there's a
First
large
count.
solar regulation and a small solar regulation.
They're struggling too.
Commissioner Cavagnaro has a comment.
Yeah, just adding on to that, that's what I was alluding to earlier about the community garden. If it's possible to do them on the rooftop, they're great for the environment. So that's just what I was alluding to earlier. So yeah.
Thank you.
If I may?
Yes.
Michelle, it's been a while since our superintendent of schools has come to talk to us. I know in the past, in like October, she's generally had like a report.
Yeah, there is a new study that I can get out to that just came out fairly recently that was presented to the board just in the last month or so. So I can email you the copy of that study.
Well, and I don't know if that encompasses everything that she discussed at the quad board meeting that some of us attended, which was very informative about the constrictions of what she's facing right now and what she's been facing like 6 months ago. So, okay, any information would be helpful. Thank you.
So let me just go around one more time quickly, and each of the commissioners indicate whether you've kind of decided you really don't want this, you're still keeping an open mind, or you think it's a great idea. And we'll start with Commissioner Bernstein.
As presented, I don't think I would be in favor of it. I would consider some hybrid.
Somewhat?
Hybrid. Part this, part something else.
Commissioner Cavagnaro?
Yeah, like I said, I'd keep an open mind. I mean, we haven't reached public hearing yet, so I'm not going to say yes or no. I mean, I'd let the public weigh in first. But, I mean, like I said, open mind. I'm not against it as it is right now. I'm just love to see how the public thinks of it, so.
I think that something, you know, is going to eventually show up over there. I'm not sure that this is the best idea, but it's certainly a first idea to start to consider. So, I think it's a good starting point.
Kevin?
I'm not in favor of this. I'm not in favor of zone changes, as most of you know. And when it does go to public hearing, if it goes to public hearing, then usually when the public speaks, we have been going against what the public ask. So I am saying no.
Commissioner Dexter?
Even though I am also not in favor of zone changes, I do think it's really tight. I think just as Deming Street came back with a much less number of units, I would recommend that you do, but from my perspective, and I know we haven't done anything with this land for a long time, isn't there a beetle or something over there? No? Just kidding. I'm not in favor of changing zones.
Beatles don't have a vote here.
I know.
Yeah, it's almost like paved paradise, put up a parking lot. These parking lots are huge. They're not that accessible for the tenants. You know, developing property as residential is one of the quickest bucks for a developer. It's not generally as much money output as, especially if it's a flat lot. It's a good way to make a quick buck as a developer, and I think there's a lot of different parts that would need to be looked at first before switching zones. Thank you.
Commissioner LeBlanc?
Yeah, I'm not a proponent for zoning changes myself. I know Bart brought up a good point certainly earlier regarding commercial property and the tax base being largely dependent on that, and I definitely support that. It's funny, like I lived here a long time and I observe what other towns do, and it seems like the whole area has been gotten apartment crazy in the last decade. Just an observation I have. I like to keep South Windsor moving forward in the right direction and not just bow to what everyone else is doing. So I like to think these things out, and certainly the public input is important regarding this. And we sit here basically because we're the voice of the public. And if I were to guess at this point, I would think that the public would not be a huge backing regarding this. It has been in similar projects, so I side with the public.
Commissioner Willett?
I have some massive concerns around the validity of your data. I lived in Simsbury before I moved to South Windsor. You can't compare South Windsor to Simsbury. We have had, in December, I believe, for the first time, we had no inventory in South Windsor. So the reason we're flatlining right now is macroeconomic issues with with residential housing. The issue is that people are stuck in their houses right now and are not moving because interest rates are too high. That's what the Fed designed. And as soon as a house comes on the market, it is snapped up instantly, usually at over asking. And where I live, everybody seems to be bringing kids with them. So I think your numbers are wrong, and I'm going to go do my own research to figure that out. But as it stands, I don't think it's a good use of that space specifically, backed up against retail, high traffic area. Frankly, I don't know if that's a great place to be putting residential. I was at Jersey Mike's probably 3 months ago. Parked my car, looked down on the ground. There's a 9mm shell casing because there was a shooting there the night before. Manchester police responded, picked up the shell casing. I don't know if that's a great spot. And they said that happens all the time there and in the commuter parking lot across the street. I wouldn't advocate for putting 600 and something units in an area where there is a crime problem.
Commissioner Boganski?
Yeah, I'm going to probably have to echo the same thing as Commissioner Willett. I have some serious, I think that because there's not enough housing right now in town, right, nothing's really turning over, this becomes available. I'm concerned about the pressure on our schools to be able to keep up. So I wouldn't be in support of it right now.
Thank you.
One more thing that should be part of our consideration, and we talked about plan of conservation and development, but this actually is a gateway to South Windsor from Manchester. This is one of our major gateways, Pleasant Valley Road. And if you're coming up Pleasant Valley Road and, you know, I'm just visualizing, I'm driving, I see a couple detention ponds on the right, and then a parking lot that's super huge and say a 4-story building behind it, or multiple 6 4-story buildings. Welcome to South Windsor. Okay, thank you.
I'm keeping an open mind at this point. You've heard some of my concerns, so I think we'll thank you and maybe look into having another discussion after people have had a chance to review the information you gave us.
I want to thank you, the commission, staff, and honestly, I never expected you guys to give us 2 hours of time. I think that is outstanding. I appreciate the openness. I'm sure John appreciates it. And we're thankful for the opportunity. And if you do want to have us back to continue this, we're more than welcome to come. So thank you.
Thank you. So looking at our agenda, which I've now lost. Oh, yes. Item 4 in new business, very briefly.
Yes, so this is an administrative correction that we're putting forward. When we were doing all of our zoning regulation changes over the last 2 years, we used a reference 4.24 twice. So that became aware of it when we were working online recently. So we've corrected the version online to be correct, but this is really an acknowledgement by the commission that we're adjusting the one section 4.24 that was the warehouse to 4.25 so that the 4.24 that we adopted previously can stay in its place. So how we've done this previously is an acknowledgement by the commission, and what we would do at this point is put something in the newspaper acknowledging it and correcting our website.
Any questions about this? So I don't think that's a problem.
No, and I did hand out new sections for you to add into your regulations.
Okay, so
should be
number
easy to
5,
put.
we've actually seen the new text also, right? So number 5 is appointment to the CROG Regional Planning Agency. Commissioner Pasaconis, when he was the chair, filled that role along with Commissioner Cavagnaro. I think we do need 2 people. Is there anyone who's super interested in doing that? In which case I'd offer myself. And Alan, are you still willing to?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I had a conversation with Michelle today. I'm pretty sure it's either a 1 or 2 year term, which regardless, my seat on the Regional Planning Commission would be up. I'm more than happy to stay on. I love the group of guys, Matt Hart, Jacob Knowlton, Krog. They're wonderful people. I enjoy doing the meetings. They're super flexible too. They're remote. They're post-COVID too. So I enjoy doing it. I'd love to stay on. So.
Okay. We have bonds.
Maybe next time we can get more people doing the bonds. But yeah, we got the IWA/CC bonds, 19-39P, all the wetland plantings, amount 5,000, reduction 5,000, and a balance of 0.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
All right, and one more bond, 15-11P, West River Farms, ENS, amount 12,500, reduction 7,500, with a balance of 5,000.
I should have asked for discussion on the last one. I don't. Usually there isn't any. Do our alternates have any question about this bond process? Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Did we get a second on that?
Yes.
Oh, okay. You seconded it?
I seconded it.
Oh, okay.
So that passes unanimously. Old business.
Just a couple things. I'm going to inundate you with some paper. I apologize. I do have a flyer for a couple folks to take. Our January 31st public meeting for our POCD has been scheduled. So if you want to take a couple flyers and post them around town, you can do that. I also put together some information related to affordable housing. What I did is I put together a memo that kind of gives you a status based on all the approvals we have in place, being Geisler's, Evergreen Walk, and now the Deming, kind of a snapshot of where we are, how many units we have, how many units we would need to meet 10%, how many points these projects could potentially give us. kind of looking at another moratorium. So just kind of some just general information. I'd be glad to answer any questions after you take a look at it. Along with that, I have a couple of publications that have been put out related to the 830G law, just kind of how municipalities are dealing with it. Just, again, just some background information, just so that you can become more educated in the 830G law, if you'd like. Okay, so I'm going to have these to hand out to you on your way out. And then the last thing I just want to tell you that I'm going to give you is our sign regulations indicate that every 4 years we take our sign regulations to public hearing to see if there's any changes either the commission may want us to make or the public is looking for us to change on the regulations. We're about at that 4.5-year period right now. So I'm going to give you a copy of the sign regulations as they currently exist. I'll be working with the chairman on getting this to a public hearing sometime in the near future. Again, it's just an open public hearing. Staff will bring forward a couple areas that we'd like to see maybe some changes. And commissioners, if you have any specific areas on signs, now would be the time to start thinking about it. And then after that public hearing, it would be up to the commission whether or not they wanted to pursue any changes to the regulations. So it seems like a lot of paper. I apologize, but it's all important. So thank you.
So does the 830G explain what the process is like? I mean, we've sort of discussed it and we're kind of afraid of it, but there's actually a process where one of these things happens.
This title is What is the Housing Appeals Procedure? So I would say yes, it does. So.
Okay. Commissioner Ritter.
Michelle, just with that, our moratorium, you said, runs out in October, right?
October of 2024, that's correct.
Okay, and we could start accumulating points only after a project is completed and occupied, right?
The certificate of occupancy is the key to getting a point, correct?
Okay, so after October, we're probably looking at least a year or two, if not more, before we could even apply for another moratorium, probably.
Yeah, I mean, this memo will kind of tell you, we've created no points since our last moratorium. So, I mean, we're looking at 217 points that you need, and you'll see in this memo here, if everything were out there were built, you'd get 130 points or whatever, you'd be halfway there. So you still need some pretty significant projects. But the points in the unit counts are two different ways of measuring the affordability, and that's why I wanted to put it out here for you, because the 10% is an actual 10% of your unit number, right? And the points is a series of points you earn based on the types of projects you put in place as an interim. So they're two different measurements that can get you out of an affordable project, depending on how you approach it.
So the project that was presented to it tonight, if we can make them 50% affordable, we probably have a fighting chance at.
Well, you need 417 units more of affordable, so.
Got it. Okay.
But you might get there through your points. I don't know. It's, again, different approaches.
Oh, no.
And again, just so that.
Bart?
And for the commission's benefit, the affordable housing plan that we put in place does have all the background on how the points are earned. Certain unit types give you certain points. So that's the basis of the information that I put together for you. So as background, the affordable housing plan would help you.
And it's also explained in there, right, about how the barrier changes for us to reject an affordable housing project once our moratorium is gone. Is that kind of explained in there?
Yeah, it does. It's talked to
Because
that.
when I read that, that was an eye-opener. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, it's really just to educate you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have on it.
So maybe we could hand out that paper while we continue to.
For the notice for the plan of conservation and development, would it be possible to send that to the commissioners so that we can share it on social media platform? Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Just briefly, especially for the public's benefit as well, we have not received any application related to the ball fields, the lit ball fields yet. I do anticipate that sometime in the next couple of weeks. I don't have an exact timetable yet, so We won't be scheduling it for public hearing, I wouldn't imagine now until sometime in February, just with the timing of only having one other regular meeting this month.
There are some preliminary drawings available at the planning office if you want to go look and see what they've got in mind. They're nowhere near what we're going to need to actually do the zoning review, but they are interesting and you can see what they have in mind. Okay, there's one more item on the agenda, I think, at the bottom. Anybody? Motion to adjourn, anyone?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seems like every time I leave one of these